last year. It said it's pretty hard to accomplish things in Washington. The Republicans control the White House and the Congress, and yet after a full year, no wall has been built, and Obamacare is still there. Federal judges are part of the problem with that. Lots of executive orders have been shot down with bogus rulings. But the core problem is a structural one. The president is not an emperor. No president is. But that does not stop mass delusions on the left that he is in fact a dictator. At an event yesterday, Hillary Clinton suggested that President Trump is on the verge of taking over this country somehow and destroying the Constitution. Watch this.
As someone who grew up in Vienna and barely escaped the Holocaust, my mother would say from time to time that it could happen here. What are your concerns about the stability of our democratic institutions and structures in these tumultuous moments?
I worry about the degradation of institutions. I'm more worried about whether our Constitution is going to be honored. So I'm hoping that the worst, the kind of question you asked me, Ruth, is just never even approached. We never get to that. But it will require people turning up and voting in these midterm elections.
Really worried about the Constitution as we try to invalidate the first two amendments to the Bill of Rights, right? There it is, though. He's a dictator, and that's not a novel take on the left. Calling Trump a dictator is something of a religious ritual now, actually.
We have a president with a strong authoritarian personality, and what frightens me is not only his respect and adoration for tyrants all over the world, but his disrespect for democracy in our own country.
We're getting more North Korean every day in this country.
There is nothing American about what Donald Trump did in Pennsylvania. He goes out there and whips up like it's a Mussolini rally, and yes, that's what I said.
I say they must call for his impeachment. Some people are saying that, well, we'll vote in 2020. We cannot stand that. We cannot wait for that. It is too dangerous.
Who put all the dumb people on TV? Somehow, despite being a dictator, people feel perfectly free to criticize the president in public to massive cheers. Nobody notices the irony. Ethan Behrman is a California radio show host and a frequent guest on our show. We're glad to have him always. He joins us tonight. Ethan, thanks for coming on. So I guess if you were a dictator, the first thing you'd want to do is take away people's right to say what they think and then take away their right to defend themselves. The first two amendments to the Bill of Rights. Is Trump doing? Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. His opponents are working on that, on invalidating and then repealing those amendments. So maybe this is transference, I'm guessing.
Well, I think the issue here, though, is he opened his campaign out like in a very authoritarian way. Let's call somebody else a bad name. Mexicans are rapists, right? So let's point out what is wrong with other people. Focus on a Muslim ban. We can't allow them into the country. That is an authoritarian move, or reaching to the other, pointing to them, and reaching into our dark places. I don't like that any bit. By the way, on the First Amendment side, he wants to strengthen defamation laws to make it easier to sue the press and other people.
But in real life,
so
look, I would say the phrases you describe would fall under the heading of rudeness, being impolite. Look, I'm not going to defend that. I think you should. I'm an Episcopalian. I believe in politeness, okay? But let's be real. Dictators do two things. One, they try to narrow the range of acceptable opinion, and they punish people who fall outside of it. That is the left doing that, not the right. Pardon me, that's true. And two, they take away people's right to defend themselves. They double down on their monopoly on the use of force. They're the only ones with guns, and the left is doing that too. So Trump may be a lot of things. You don't like him, I get it. But the authoritarian tendencies are on the left. Do you not see that?
No, I mean, well, some on the extreme left I would actually agree with you on, but no, absolutely not. Look, anti-Jewish crimes, according to the ADL, went up 57% here in the United States last year under Trump's watch in 2017 at a rate and a number that hasn't been seen in a very long time. This is an alarming trait that we've been seeing.
I wonder where that's coming from, though. I mean, I know that you're sort of at the vanguard of calling for increased Muslim immigration into the country. Taking a look across the ocean at Europe, where crimes against Jews, anti-Semitic crime, has risen dramatically in, say, Paris. Is that being led by right-wingers, or is it being led by Muslim immigrants?
Oh, you don't think any of the extreme right-wing nationalists in places like Germany and France have anything to do with any of that as well?
Maybe some. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but let's be real. Ask anybody. I mean, talk to any Israeli who recently moved from France. I don't think they're mad at Marine Le Pen. They're really upset about Muslim immigration because the anti-Semitism is coming from Muslims. So given that we know that, it's kind of beyond debate. Why would you, as someone who's concerned about that, be calling for more Muslim immigration here?
I haven't specifically called for more Muslim immigration. What I have called for is a continuance of our legal immigration programs and embracing those who are already here, Tucker. I think it's important to include and involve people in our communities and not set them apart and make them into the other, which appeals to the Jungian shadow, which is bad. We don't need to appeal to the dark side.
No, I'm opposed to the Jungian shadow. I am. But I'm also opposed to Freudian projection, since we're getting deep into German psychiatrists. And I just think it's very striking that if you're concerned about government overreach and the election of a dictator, and I actually am concerned about that, I think all good Americans are. The framers were concerned about it. That's why they wrote the Constitution the way they did. Then you ought to be terrified of anybody who attacks your freedom to say what you think is true. And what I find so striking is how nobody on the left ever says anything. As universities kick kids out, punish people for having divergent points of view, don't allow speakers to say what they think. Like, that's fascist stuff. Why doesn't anybody ever mention that?
Well, two things. One, next time you're in San Francisco, listen to my show, or you can listen online, Tucker. I actually talk about that. I don't appreciate shutting down free speech. I think it's very important that you and I have these conversations. We must, in a democracy, having the fair exchange of ideas. However, there are some thoughts and ideas that don't deserve to be aired, and you and I have a tendency to choose not to air those. No.
They don't deserve to be aired, so you don't have the right. So everything's cool unless people disagree with you, in which case we have to punish them. Oh, well, sure, but you're not. Wait, hold on. What I'm saying is the left is punishing people for saying what they think is true. Now, not everyone agrees with everyone else's opinion. Like, to have free speech, you have to tolerate the views of people you disagree with, and the left no longer does. You don't see that as authoritarian.
No, I do not agree with you that the left no longer does. I think that is a very small fringe element that tries to shut it down. I think
Google, Facebook, Twitter, biggest companies in America, I mean, leading boycotts against people whose opinions you don't like. You don't see this as troubling?
Yeah, any time that we shut down free speech in an open and public place, I'm absolutely on your side on that one. Organizations have a place to keep a workplace friendly and open to all people. And if you're offending your person sitting next to you, that is something that HR has to deal with, because we also have laws related to that, too.
That's where speech goes to die. HR, of course. Ethan, thank you so much. Good luck with your HR department.
Happy
Victor Davis
Easter.
Hanson, a far deeper man than I. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and professor of classics emeritus at Cal State Fresno, and he joins us tonight. Professor, you spent a lot of time studying dictatorships and how they take power from the people and hold it to themselves and basically do what they will despite popular sentiment. What are the things that dictatorships do first to prepare the way for totalitarian rule?
One of the things that Hillary Clinton said in that speech is they destroy trust and transparency, and that was quite ironic because she was introduced to the national scene in her late 30s by parlaying a $1,000 investment in cattle futures into a $100,000 investment, which was a mockery of the whole transparent idea of investment. And it was 4 trillion to 1 odds, and then she didn't pay taxes. Fast forward 40 years through, Travelgate, Filegate, the Rose Law Firm records, Uranium One, the email, they all have one constant common denominator, Tucker, and that's a lack of transparency and a feeling that she's exempt from the equal application of the law. So it's kind of, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but one of the ironies, when she gave that speech, she got $25,000. Had she given it 2 years ago or 4 years ago, she would have had 100 times that amount, as would her husband, because they had something that people wanted, and that was influence to buy. And so now she doesn't have it, and she's sort of bitter, and she's shrill, and she's angry, but she's engaged in projection where she's fobbing off the perceived sins of herself onto others. And this is, you made a good point, because every time a Republican is in power, he's a Nazi, a brown shirt. When George W. Bush was there in 2006, if you remember, Al Gore, George Soros, Garrison Keillor, Linda Ronstadt, he was a fascist brown shirt. We had a movie about how to kill him. We had a novel, Checkpoint, And then suddenly he's out, he doesn't have the reins of power anymore, and he's a sober and judicious never-Trumper. But now Donald Trump has inherited the same role. We have the same documentary about killing him. We have an op-ed about John Wilkes Booth again. We have the Nazi slur. And it's all based on the premise that exalted so-called noble means justify any noble ends justify any means of obtaining them. And it's again and again and again. And I'm not worried about Donald Trump until he weaponizes the IRS in the manner of Lois Lerner under the Obama administration, or that if Mike Pompeo had 30,000 emails that he was destroying, I'd be really worried at Secretary of State. Or if H.R. McMaster had ordered surveillance be unmasked and leaked from the NSC, or they warped at the Trump administration was trying to warp the FISA courts with an anti-Hillary hit piece, I'd be worried. But so far, it's been on the other side.
Yeah, that would be worrisome. All of it.
It would,
and I think
because
we would be honest. I hope I would be honest enough to say it, too, if they ever do that.
I hope I would, too.
I think you would be. I know you would be. Professor, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.